Okay, let me stop counting up. 3, 2, there you go. Chantel, take it over.
Okay, so hello everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Chantel, co-organizer, sorry. So once the session has started, if at any point you cannot hear the speaker, please let us know through the chat. I'm pleased to introduce today's speaker, José Valim. It's such an honor to have the founding father of Elixir grace us today. Before I hand it over to Siku, who is the moderator, I have a few things to point out. Today's webinar recordings will be available on our YouTube channel for those who won't be able to make it or drop out during the call. We'd like to encourage you to share the webinar through your social networks. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you. You haven't told them about technical details.
Oh yeah, sorry. So as the session progresses, we apologize. We might have technical difficulties because we've had this before. So please bear with us if that happens. Okay.
All right. Thank you very much. That's a kind introduction to Jose. Jose, actually, we were trying to prepare some introduction for you, and we were like, no, we can't introduce you. So we don't know what not to say about you. There's so much to be said about you. So we just let it to you so that when you start, we give you the honor of introducing yourself so we don't spoil it. So please take it over. Just tell us who you are. We know, but just tell us who you are.
All right. Hi, everyone. Thanks, everybody, for joining. Thanks for organizing. I also don't know how to do this, so we'll go with I am José Valim, and I am the creator of Elixir, which I assume is the reason why we are here. And I'll be glad to chat with everybody and answer questions for the next minutes.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So a correction of your introduction, it should be you are the José Valim, not José Valim. Okay, so just to set expectations for everyone else, yes, we wish to have everyone speak at the same time, but that will be chaotic a bit. So I'll be taking over the moderation of this session. There's a Slido link available. So if you really feel like you want to ask a question, kindly ask it on Slido. We are going to read it out for Jose. Towards the end, we might open it up for you to ask your questions. I'll go straight to introducing what ElixirKenya is. ElixirKenya is an idea that started sometime in Paul, when was that? That was 2018, I think.
2017.
2017, right. So it was 2017. ElixirKenya started when no one knew how to write Elixir. Everyone knew about Elixir. So me and Paul and a couple of people met and we were like, why can't we do something about Elixir? And I was like, no, let me still stick to what I know. I'm not going to do the switch. But long story short, ElixirKenya started as a WhatsApp group. Overnight, I told Paul, just create a WhatsApp group so that everyone can join in and we just start doing this. So we started out the group. It's been a couple of years. People have been joining. People have been trained, and there has been a little bit adoption over here and there. And we've taken a couple of steps just to make sure that the community is active and it's working. So the first one was in 2018, we made a commitment that we're going to do weekly meetups every day on Monday from 1:30 to 2:30 our local time and work on something related to Elixir. So we've managed to do this for almost 2 years now, where we meet every day, every week on Mondays, and just have a discussion. We do pair programming. We match beginners and intermediates on all that to come up with various projects. That has been coordinated very well by Tracy. She's also here. She's really coordinated that. We've also managed to have our monthly webinars. We've had a couple of amazing speakers, both from Kenya and all over. The speaker hunt has been done by Tracy with the help of Chantel, who was right here. Thank you, Getty, for getting us José Valim over to this. This is actually our first Q&A for ElixirKenya. We've also started we actually have a couple of open source projects in Elixir. They're about 2 or 3, which is being led by Magak. I haven't seen him in this call yet, but Magak has been doing an amazing job on code reviews and all that, just checking on the libraries, trying to coordinate the team and all that. There's a plan. This is a plan for having a conference, which was pushed by Moha. He's been pushing this for like 2 years. Why can't we have a conference? Now that COVID happened, yeah, we're probably going to have a conference, an Elixir conference remotely, because it's now easy to get people on board and we don't have to fly people in here and there. So welcome, everyone. And I'm going to start with a question to Jose. I don't know if he's ready. You ready? It's not a tough one. So I've personally been wondering how really do you manage your time? Because I sometimes see you on Twitter, you're on Elixir forum, you're on GitHub, you're on Slack, and now you have time to talk with us. You also commit, and there's just a lot. I use your portfolio as an encouragement to every other programming beginner, just to show them that you can commit daily, you can work each and every day. So how really do you do this?
Right. So so I think first of all, it's worth saying that I've been very fortunate and privileged to be working on open source full time for, I don't know even how long at this point, maybe 6 years, probably around 6-7 years. So I have this advantage where, the huge majority of my work's public for people to see, while a lot of people, they work a lot, but it's private, right? Nobody can see it. So I think that's one of the big points. And the other one is that I try to be very responsible with my time and in terms of distractions. Today, it's very easy for you to get distracted and not make progress because you do something for 15 minutes and then you get distracted, and those 15 minutes, they kind of go to waste. So one of the tips and advices that I do is that I disable everything. It's like, so I don't receive notifications for anything except like my close family, right? So I'm actually, I'm not actively on Twitter. I'm not actively on the forum, in the sense that I'm not receiving notifications when anything happening there. It's just that, so for example, and things like Twitter, Reddit, and Hacker News, those things I generally don't use. I just go there if I have to say something, for example, but I generally don't use. And for things like the forum, I just check it if I have some free time or if I want to get distracted, right? So for example, I just finished something hard and then my brain's a little bit fried. I kind of don't want to start something big again. I want to relax a little bit. So I go to the forum and then I answer some questions. But I think the most important to me, it's not getting distracted when I am actually doing the work, right? So some days it's very interesting because I start working around like 8:39, and then I can get like 4 hours of like very productive work, like no distraction whatsoever, right? Because I'm just working on the problem. But then after those 4 hours, I'm completely fried. I can't do anything. I can merge pull requests here and there. Maybe I'll answer something in the Elixir forum, but that was kind of like my budget for coding for the day. But yeah, that's kind of how I try to manage my time.
I was muted. Awesome. So basically, it's more about discipline from what you're saying.
Yeah, I think that's a good summary, yeah.
Yeah, just be disciplined with your time. So there's another question asked anonymously on Slido. Slido has an option of anonymously asking. So there's some couple of curiosity because it's been upvoted a bit about your developer story or just your story generally. If you could do a summary of how you've gotten here as a developer. How did you get started and how did you get here?
Oh yeah, that's well, I've been developing at some point at this point for 16, 17 years, so it's kind of a long story. So at this point, so I'll go for the most interesting bit. So so I started to program when I was at university. So I have a engineering degree, and and on the first year of engineering, you kind of end up learning a little bit of all the engineering, like mechanical engineering, chemistry engineering, this kind of stuff. And one of those were like introduction to programming, where I learned how to program in C. And this was, really like was, the professor would write programs in the blackboard. We would do our exams writing on paper, and but that's kind of how I learned, and I really liked that initial experience. So this was the first semester of university, and then between the semesters we had a break. I had a band at university, so during the break I decided to write a website for my band at the time, and it was a website in Flash. So nobody uses Flash nowadays, but at the time that's what we were doing. That was like the first thing that I learned. Like I programmed by myself and I learned by myself, and from there, I ended up going more to doing website kind of thing. So I learned I learned PHP, I learned MySQL very briefly, and then JavaScript and the stuff. At the time we were just learning how to do things with Ajax, for example, and so on. So it was very early on in this web development JavaScript kind of thing. But yeah, so and then so I went kind of PHP, MySQL, JavaScript, and then the big boost for me was, I think, 2000, at the end of 2006, 2007, when I learned Ruby. And then I got really involved with the Ruby and Rails community. And then, learned a lot there. And eventually I started working on Elixir around 2011. And I have been doing mostly Elixir and Erlang since then.
All right, awesome. So I think everyone who started programming some way back, they never failed to mention PHP. And and anyone who talks about a programming language they don't want to use again, they never also probably fail to mention a few languages. So I think a bit about the journey. That's an awesome journey to the moment. And some people feel like you're somewhere at the top. Most people feel that. And they're just wondering, do you really have anyone you're looking up to? Because everyone is looking up to you. And are you looking up to anyone at the moment?
So yes, and so since last year, I have been trying to. So okay, let me give the answer, and then I'll go to in more detail. And a lot of the people I look up to is in the Erlang OTP team. So Kenneth, Bjorn, John, Lucas. So when I started Elixir, so the biggest merit in Elixir is the fact that we leverage all the infrastructure in the Erlang virtual machine, the Erlang compilers and stuff, and everything in there. And then when I started, so when you compile Elixir software, and most compilers in general, it's not like a single transformation. It's not like, oh, Elixir and Beam file. It's actually Elixir, and then Elixir becomes Erlang, that becomes core Erlang, that becomes static single assignment. So there are like a bunch of steps. And when I started, I knew only the very top of this thing, right? Which is like, oh, I'm going from I'm going from Elixir to Erlang. And then in those almost 10 years, I was able to go lower and lower in the stack, but I still don't know everything in there, right? And then a lot of times, like I am so for example, the JIT was just merged into the VM, and I have been reviewing the code for since it has been merged, so for a month, maybe a little bit more than a month. I cannot, I have to do multiple passes, and I'm just reviewing, looking at the code, and I'm learning so much. So, I find extremely fascinating the things that they do. There is, I don't understand a lot of what is happening there, and I think that's are some of the exciting parts. But the work and the quality of the work is just fantastic.
Yeah, that's an awesome thing. You just said that things you don't know. Our assumption was that you know everything that you do. So that really encourages most of us who know that they don't know anything. And probably it's called the, how do you normally call this? How do you call this effect where you think you don't know, but you know? Anyone who remembers that, yeah? Yeah, the imposter syndrome. So do you sometimes suffer from that imposter syndrome? And if you do, how do you deal with that?
I'm actually not sure. I will need to read up on imposter syndrome and what it means. I'm not very familiar.
Yeah, I can explain that.
It's when you feel like you're a fraud at something.
Yeah, when you feel like when you feel like you don't know so much, but everyone thinks that you know everything.
Okay, I see.
Yeah.
I see. I don't know. I don't know if that's something that I go through. Like, I know that I don't know a lot, and I'm very comfortable with that. That's not something that bothers me. It's rather, exciting, like, in the sense, and it's not something that I know that I'll never know anything anyway. So it's fine. I am very comfortable with not knowing things.
Okay, that's okay. So I also heard you mention about the OTP team and all that. There's a question by Sandesh, and he's actually asked, is there any difference between the Erlang OTP and the Elixir OTP? Because he's been asked this question a couple of times.
That's a good question, and I think you could answer both yes and no and be correct. I think the foundations, they are the same, right? They are like the foundations, they are exactly the same. So we could say that it's 80% the same, and Elixir adds a couple things on top, like tasks, agent, dynamic supervisor. So that would be my answer. It's like, it's the huge majority is definitely the same, and Elixir adds its own takes. And there are a couple things that I think maybe Erlang developers, they use more than Elixir developers, like the Gen FSM, like the state machine stuff, because we don't expose directly with in Elixir. So maybe Erlang developers are going to use that more than Elixir developers. But I think, like, huge majority is definitely the same OTP.
All right, thank you about that. Yes, Sandesh is going to ask for clarification.
Is there any performance difference? I believe it should not be, but what
no, there are no performance difference, because Elixir and Erlang, they compile to the same thing. There are some places in Elixir where maybe there are some Elixir idioms that may be, like a bit slower, and is lower, I'm saying, like, 0.1% slower, right? Based on some idioms that we like to promote as a community. But there are some things that in Elixir that we can do because of, of the compile time generation that is going to be more efficient. And those cases, they're also going to be a tiny bit faster, but I think overall they are, it's the same in terms of performance. They should behave equally.
All right. Technical question. The plan was that we do the community as we move over to technical. I just found the technical question, but let's go back a bit to the community. and the ecosystem. So there's a question by Yuri. Yuri, if you have a follow-up question, you are free to ask. But what you're asking is, you're asking Jose what he's really excited about in the Elixir ecosystem for the next year.
Oh, I try to, at the very top, like follow up everything that is happening, and there are things that I am involved with that I'm really excited about, like, you know, Phoenix Live View, and the things that my team at Dashbeat we are working on. So we are working on Broadway for event processing. We are working on XDoc. We are trying to make XDoc be the tool used for the whole Erlang ecosystem. So we want to be able to use XDoc to generate documentation for Erlang project. So, you know, there will be an option of you like accessing the Erlang OTP docs through the XDoc page, you know, the same page that we are familiar with. So I'm of course very excited about those things. But I'm also like following up. I'm very excited about all the things that I don't know. So, you know, whenever there is like, I really don't understand a lot about nerves, but whenever there's a new release, I'm reading the notes. The same for Scenic, the membrane framework for audio video. So all the activities, you know, in the community, I'm excited. I'm really excited about them. There is also, you know, the work we just talked about, the work happening in the VM. I guess this is not a fair answer because I'm kind of just listing everything. But yeah, I am generally excited about the progress in the community. And the thing that I would like to see more, and I have talked about this a couple of times, is to see the community start moving and make some progress in relation to machine learning. I don't know exactly how that would like. I'm trying to explore some ideas to make this happen, but yeah, that's kind of like I don't think there is one thing that I would pinpoint as the most exciting. I think there are a bunch of exciting things happening, and depending on which area of the community you are interested on, you're going to be more attracted to that side or the other side.
Yuri, you're nodding, so I hope that answers everything you wanted to ask. Yeah, awesome. So now that we've talked about the ecosystem and the community and all that, I think Elixir is, compared to some other language, it's a bit, we can say fairly new. It's not as new as others. So you can't find someone with 15, 20 years experience in Elixir because it's not that old. So that means that majority of the members of Elixir or majority of those in the ecosystem are actually learning. So the question that we have here is, there's someone asking, let me just look for it. Just lost it. Yeah, so if you are an intermediate, there's not so many advanced people. How best can someone learn being an intermediate, or when they want to get into advanced level? What's the best way that they can learn Elixir, considering that not so many people are experts in this?
To be honest, I don't know the answer to this question, not because there is no answer, but because it has been such a long time since I've learned Elixir. And I've been, in the position where, my experience is kind of unique. So it's not really a good reference. I think this would be a great question for you to kind of like, discuss between yourselves, or ask somebody who has, you said like you have the meetup. So you definitely have better answers for that question than me, because my path has been kind of different, and I've been here for a while. That sometimes it's hard to remember exactly what are the pains that I have been through and so on.
Yeah, that's actually a great answer for that. And now that you've talked about having all that, I don't know if you're in a position to answer this one. When someone gets into the Elixir code, the code base for Elixir, and they want to understand how Elixir works, do you have any recommendations as to which modules they should just get started with while they try to understand the code base?
So most of Elixir is written in Elixir, and which makes it, relatively straightforward to jump into the code. But if you're getting started, so Elixir is made of like 6 applications. So it's Elixir itself, it's EX, which is the templating language, is the interactive Elixir, the logger, XUnit, the test framework, and Mix. So those are the 6. And everything except Elixir itself, it's kind of going to be their own individual applications that can be studied in their own. So I think those are all good candidates for learning. So XUnit is interesting, for example, because it has a good chunk about process and process coordination, and it has a good chunk of metaprogramming because of the macros. So it can be an interesting part an interesting place to get started. Mix is nice because it's focused on building CLIs and this kind of stuff. So, installing things on your machine. There are some complex algorithms for dependency resolution, so there's an interesting set of problems in there. EX is the smallest of all of them, and it can be a really good example if you want to learn how to parse something. How do you get from a template, like the EX template, which is just a file, to something that is compiled. That could be nice. IEX Interactive Elixir, it's a little bit of a oddball because it has to integrate with the Erlang shell. So there's a lot of Erlang specific details. So maybe that's not a super good one to jump into. But XUnit, Mix, and EX, they can all be very interesting. And there's also Logger, which has a good chunk of Erlang integration as well, but can also be interesting exactly because with the Logger, we need to have like some scalability concerns, which we don't necessarily need to have in the other applications, because with Logger, what you have is that you may have a bunch of things trying to log at the same time, and you don't want that logging to be a bottleneck, or you don't want you don't want to have a huge queue to log and eventually run out of memory. So there are like some very practical scalability runtime concerns in there so you can find some neat tricks. And in Elixir itself, if you want to really learn about the compiler and how things go, then it can be a good jump. But in Elixir itself, you can also like find some individual modules, which would be totally fine for you to explore just the module, like the string module, right? It's totally self-contained. The regex module. So those that, keyword module, the map modules, they are all going to be reasonably self-contained, that if you want to kind of just look around and see how it works, you're going to get a good glimpse. But in the Elixir application, there are some parts like that are really about the compiler that things may get a little bit, tricky. There's a good amount of context, but that's kind of like my very brief tour of the code base. So I hope I answered part of it.
Yeah, I really hope so too. And there's this other interesting question. Let's break a bit from a bit of technical things. There's this other interesting question. Have you ever seen Elixir used in a way that you really never expected it to be, and it just surprised you somehow? You're muted.
Thank you. Yeah, so today it's kind of common for us. It has been normalized, but the first time I felt like that was with nerves. So when somebody, I think it was in one of at the time they were called Erlang Factory. I was at Erlang Factory event, and then they were telling me like they are using nerves to build like those embedded systems and having Elixir running on it, and exploring those options. That was very fascinating for me. And the same when Cynic came, and the things that people started doing with it, those were all I think was like my first biggest surprise, let's say that. there are a couple of things that I knew that the VM would be good for, and I was kind of waiting for it to happen. So, I really like Phoenix. Phoenix has a bunch of great ideas, but I knew it was coming, right? I knew a web framework was going to happen, right? So it was surprised in the implementation. There are great ideas in there, but not the idea. While Nerves, for example, just surprised me with everything.
Awesome. So actually, I've just remembered something based on one of the questions that it's over there. So like for us, we do software consulting and we major in Elixir. That's actually what we do 98% of the time. And there's a challenge that we face. How do you really convince a startup that they should use Elixir? So I'm just putting this to you off the top of your head. How can you convince a startup that you need, they've approached you for a software solution? What basis can you use to convince them that the startup will be best suited to use Elixir?
Right. So there are many aspects, right? So one of the things that I say is like when you're going to compare Elixir with other technologies, like other dynamic languages that are so let's say we're going to talk about web development. Let's restrict because otherwise it's too broad, right? So let's say, a startup that are building a web app, right? Mm-hmm. So when we're comparing with the other like dynamic languages like Ruby, Node, Python, like to me, Elixir is the best option in technical terms, right? It's going to be the fastest, it's going to be the simpler in terms of operations. I think it's the one that is going to lead to more maintainable code. So of course it also has downsides, right? But I think like looking only at the technological side, for me I'm obviously biased, right? But for me, it's in terms of technology, it wins, right? The problem is that technology is not necessarily the only concern that people are going to look at, right? So if somebody's very centric in the terms of like the technology, if there is a company, either because of the problem they are trying to solve, they need to be very tech centric, right? Or because or the problem or the person or the team, they're very tech-centric, then this discussion becomes much easier and we can attack through this perspective. But otherwise, it's a much wider discussion, and then you're going to have things, sure, we can do it in Elixir, it's a better technology, but we are really struggling with finding engineers. So how we are going to conciliate that? And then you need to come up with a plan that, it's going to be often very local, right? So for example, in your case, you can say, if somebody comes to you and asks you like, how are you going to hire? And then you can say, hey, we have this meetup. It's happening every week. If you have engineers interested, tell them to come. We are going to be glad to talk with them. And you can do that together as a community, right? So you can give a very local answer. Other places, they may not have that answer. Other places, they may be fine with leveraging like the remote pool of all developers around. So then the answer starts to vary, and you need to approach it depending, on a case by case basis. One of the things that we have been trying to do to help with that is to have the cases on the Elixir website. So right now we have 4 or 5. We have Heroku, Brex, Farmbot, and Discord. Yeah, we have 4. There's going to be another one coming at the end of the month. And what we are trying to do is to get the experience from people building it across different industries. And so far, we have been focusing a lot on the very big cases like Discord, right? Like, yeah, Discord runs at a very big scale. Like, how was the quote? Like 26 million events per second. Like, not everybody's going to run at that scale, right? Most people are not. So right now we are focusing at the very big ones, but one of the things that we want to do is to start focusing from now on across different industries, and just say, we use Elixir to solve the problems in this industry, and it went great. The code, we have been able to hire, we have been able to grow the team and start focusing on those other aspects on how to adopt Elixir. That is not necessarily like we chose it because of technology. It's more like, oh, we chose it because, we think that the application is more maintainable and the team is going to be happier. And, and because there was an interest, a lot of people, they want to learn it. So that was a good positive thing for the company and so on. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think at this point, that's where we plug the book, Adopting Elixir, for those interested also. I think they can get that book and just read it for more on what considerations that needs.
Can someone else please take the mic?
Oh, so can everybody hear me?
Yes.
I think Sig is facing a technical issue. We can just give him some few minutes and then he'll come back. So before he comes back, we can just go through some of the questions that have been asked. We have a question here. Is there any chance for a static type Elixir considering Erlang 2 coming from Facebook WhatsApp team? Will that happen any soon?
So is there a chance? Yes. Would that happen anytime soon? It's probably not, right? Because if you look at the VM right now and the ecosystem, we are starting to see a bunch of typed efforts, right? So there is Gleam, there is Erlang, the Erlang effort from the WhatsApp team. And a lot of it, one thing that people need to have in mind is that a lot of it, it's kind of experimental. So, when the WhatsApp team announced the Erlang, right, their static Erlang effort, it's not going to be ready, right? It's going to be a very initial version. So think Elixir back in 2012. And it's going to take some time for those efforts to mature and for them to reach to conclusions or like, oh, what worked, what didn't work, right? So in my mind, it's like, could Elixir be have more static things in the future? It could, but I think right now the wisest thing for us to do, since we have so many people exploring those approaches, is to see exactly what they're exploring, to see what they're doing, what they're not doing. And then after some amount of time, when they say, we are happy with this and we think that this is how it should be, now we can go as a community and look, oh, that's what they're happy with. So, let's look at that and see what we can bring in. So my answer would be a summary. It's like, I'm very excited about all the experimentation happening. I will let the experiments be experiments. And when we have more concrete answers, I think we should look at that and see what we can learn from them.
Awesome. I guess cool. I know what the question was. Oh, Tracy, you asked that.
You can just proceed.
Okay, thank you very much for taking over. The internet just disappeared, so I was worried a bit. Thank you so much, Tracy, for that. There's a question again, maybe answered, maybe not. So I'll read it straight. Projects such as Lumen Compiler and with addition recent of the Beam ASM to the Erlang OTP, how far are we to compiling Elixir application to WebAssembly and to the ARM architecture?
I don't know. We'll have to ask them. I don't know the answer.
Awesome. So Great answer over there. And by the way, if you're listening in and you want a question to be answered, it's already asked. Please upvote it so it appears up. We have to scroll down to answer so many questions. You've talked about, there's a question here. Is there any chance for a statically typed Elixir? I think that has been answered.
Yep.
Yeah, that has been answered. Okay, so if you could touch something about the umbrella application, is it in any way microservice, or I'm actually reading this question. Is it a microservice architecture for, and some people discourage its use. What do you think about it?
Sorry, I lost you briefly. Can you repeat the question?
Oh, sorry. Okay, let me repeat it. Umbrella applications. Some people discourage against it. What's your thought, and how do you advise the community on our end?
Okay, so you mentioned the Adopting Elixir book, and the book does talk about umbrella applications. It's okay. Yeah, and so the book talks about umbrella applications, and I think the best way to understand umbrella applications and when to use it and when not to use it is to understand what it does for you and the pros and cons, right? So the umbrella applications, they are two things. Umbrella applications, it's a monorepo, and a monorepo is a pattern that exists totally outside of Elixir, and we don't actually need Elixir to have monorepos working. So what is a monorepo? A monorepo is when you have all of your applications. So imagine that you are a big company. So they say that Google, Facebook, they all have a monorepo. So like your first day at the job is like downloading like 50 gigabytes of the big repository, right? So you don't have to have a monorepo this big, but the idea is that, you know, if you are working on 3 different services, instead of going to a repository, doing the changes there, sending up requests, then you go to another repository, replicate the changes and try to manage that, everything's in a single monorepo. So that's one of the things that Umbrella gives you. You don't need to use umbrellas to get that. You can just have everything in the same repository. But umbrellas is part of the package. They come with monorepos. So, you know, that's one point. But the other things that umbrellas give you is that they allow, if you have everything in the same repository, they allow everything in that repository to share the same dependencies, okay? And this is mostly a developer experience optimization, right? Because imagine you have like 10 different repositories and they all depend on Phoenix, right? Then you have to download Phoenix 10 times, compile Phoenix 10 times, right? And you're like, oh, you don't want to do that, right? That just makes everything slower. So you say, okay, I want to make everything, you know, share the same dependencies. And that's what the umbrella does. So what is the advantage? Things are going to be faster. You're going to run tests faster because you can just load everything together. What are the advantages? Is that everything is using the same dependencies. So if you have like 10 repositories and then you want to upgrade the Phoenix version in one because you want to use a new feature, you have to upgrade all of them at the same time because they're using the same dependencies. They all have to configure Phoenix in the same way. So, so that's the downsides. In the past, people, they would complain about umbrellas because umbrellas are meant to help you enforce the boundaries between applications. But that was a theoretical benefit, but you didn't get that in practice because Elixir would not warn. But in Elixir 1.11, we are actually strictly enforcing those boundaries now. So it's a benefit that we have been saying for years that you have that or you should have that, and it has finally landed. So Elixir 1.11 actually improved umbrellas a little bit and making those the boundaries between application more explicit. Because before you could, you know, umbrellas kind of felt like a monorepo in the sense that not a monorepo, a monolith. Right? Because even though you broke into multiple applications, the applications, they could all call each other with no restriction. But now we are at least enforcing some of that. So you cannot just call whatever you want. So it feels less like a monolith. It's like a monolith with some structure and some boundaries in it.
Okay, awesome explanation. So I think we actually just ran out of time. Do you have a few more minutes?
Oh, let's do this.
right,
we
awesome.
can go for like 20, 30 minutes more, if
right.
it's okay with you guys.
Yeah, that will be great. So I think there's a question, an Elixir question, and it's about maps. So in Elixir, you can pattern match an empty map to a map with values and it will not fail. Yeah, so this was asked by Wanjiko Masharia, and she was asking, why would that be the case? And would it not be easy? Why are you not allowing pattern matching of empty maps with empty maps? I don't know if I'm making sense. Let me just copy this.
I understand. Yeah. So right. So it's kind of the answer is kind of like it's part of the rules of the language, in the sense in that a map you can have, like you get a struct, you can have 10 keys, right? And you may be interested in accessing only 2 of those keys. So forcing you to have match on all 10 of them to get only 2 would be pretty boring. So the decision was that maps, they're always a subset map, right? A subset match. So when you're putting match on map, you're only interested in that subset of the keys. If it has other keys, you don't care. You're only interested in those you list. So part of the language, that was the decision. That's why an empty map, because we're matching subsets, an empty map is going to be a subset of all of the other maps. So that's kind of why it matches everything. I know it is confusing sometimes, where you just say, oh, I'm expecting an empty map, and you're not getting an empty map, you're kind of getting everything, and then you need to write the guard format. I know that sometimes trips people up, but there is no other alternative that would not have its own downsides, right? If we made empty maps a special case, that would be confusing because it's subset, but not always. If we forced everybody to have to match on all the fields, that would get boring pretty fast. So it's kind of like, we have to make a choice, and the choice of being a subset, we think, is the one that makes most sense the majority of time.
Okay, Wanjiko, I hope you got the answer right. So just to see how good of a teacher you are, I know you are. There's just this curiosity question. How can you, as Jose, explain the difference between parallelism and concurrency? So many people confuse this, so this is just on a lighter note. And do you have any real-world example of your explanation for that?
Okay, so let me... Okay, so I'll give an example of a Brazilian example. Okay, so when when I was back in Brazil working at Plataforma Tech, we would work close to Avenida Paulista, which is like the busiest avenue in the whole Brazil, right? It's where all the commercial buildings are. So I guess it's kind of like Manhattan in New York, where there's probably a big street, right? Where there's just a lot of people all the time, right? So what would happen is that when you would go to the restaurants, all the restaurants there, they would be super big because there's just a lot of people, and there's just a lot of people, and they would all go out to eat at the same time around lunchtime, right? So we had big restaurants, and one of the issues that those restaurants was having is that the people, they could not leave because a lot of people would come, and then a lot of people would finish eating, and they would have to leave at the same time. So what they started doing is, so they had to optimize how fast people can leave, right? And most people, they are paying with credit card, right? So they solved this problem with concurrency and parallelism, right? So what did they do? So imagine that at the end, right, when you have to pay, there is going to be one person, one cashier that is going to be accepting credit cards. So what they did is that they gave 3 credit cards machine for each person. So you know, if three of us would go out, that person would get the credit card, my credit card, pass it on the machine, and while the machine was processing my card, that the person would get the card of the second person, pass on the other machine, and the card of the third person, and pass on the third machine. That's concurrency. We have a single resource, a single person that is being able to handle 3 requests at the same time, is being able to handle the credit card that we are paying for what we ate, right, at the same time. That's concurrency. But they also did parallelism. And they did parallelism by getting another cashier to be on the side of that one. So it's a separate resource, right? That is, and I'm using resource here, not because I'm referring to people as resource, but because I'm trying to do the mapping with computer science, right? So we have a separate resource, right? So we have a separate cashier, right? That is being able to handle a whole other bunch of requests that are not, a whole separate bunch of requests, right? Not related to the first person at all. And that cashier can do concurrency as well, right? So you know, so the way I would summarize it is that a concurrency would be when you have one resource, so for example, a machine core, and that core is jumping across a bunch of different tasks. That's concurrency. And parallelism is when you have those different cores working on independent tasks, right? And sometimes those independent tasks, they are subtasks of a major coordinated task, but that's a separate discussion. But one of the ways I like to look at it, it's like, you know, if single resource doing multiple jobs, that's concurrency. Different resources working on separate or the same problem or subparts of the problem, that is parallelism. That would be my take on it.
All right. You're a good teacher. Yeah, that's a great explanation, and that really helped me better understand this. So I know we didn't prepare you for this. We got this from, I think it's Johnny. I think it's Johnny's podcast where we have 5 behind the code. We've had a lot. So we've heard a lot about you, Jose, in regards to Elixir and all that. We know you have a life other than Elixir. And that's some of the questions that you're going to ask. So the first one is, which meal do you enjoy most?
Meal? That's, so I'll go, okay, so my answer is going to be chicken tikka masala, which is Indian food. I mean, people fight which kind of food it is, but for me, it's Indian food. So when I'm traveling, when I go to places and I find an Indian restaurant, I like to go. So if I'm in a different city and they have an Indian restaurant, I'll definitely go eat there because I want to taste how their tikka masala, how I want to see how their tikka masala looks like. So I would go that as my favorite meal. I really enjoy it.
Awesome. I know Nigerians in here are almost screaming, jollof rice. They love their jollof rice. So maybe you could try the Nigerian jollof rice. Is that so, Shoaib? Let's move over to the next one. So you play instruments. There's an instrument you play.
Yeah, so I probably really bad at all of them right now. But when I had a band, I would play the guitar, the bass, and the keyboard. But that was a very long time ago. I have not practiced it at all in the last 10 years or even more.
Wow, 10 years is quite a long time. So
yeah.
How really do you spend your weekends? Typical weekend.
So a lot of it with the family. I have 2 kids now. So one is 6, the other one is 2. So it ends up being family time. Before 2020, we would go out, but now we just stay at home. My 6-year-old, he's at least old now that we can play video games together. So sometimes we do that. But yeah, it's mostly family centric.
All right. Any other? I think that's it from this side. Do you have any questions about ElixirKenya and the community in general? We can finish it on that.
I have questions, but the introduction that I really like the introduction that you gave. Speaking about how it started, and there was also the talk which gave some really good insights. So I think all the initial questions that I had, and I took notes, you answered at the beginning, at the introduction, which was really good. My only question was, the only remaining question is, like, at the meetups that you have, like, how many people are involved, and just title of curiosity.
Chantel, you have the right number. Do you remember Monday meetups? Tracy, how many are we during the Monday meetups? The regular ones, if you can remember. We usually, Paul, do you remember?
I think normally around 5.
Usually
Around 5, 6. Yeah.
5, 6. Yeah.
Yeah, it averages about that. And our monthly webinars, it's an average of how many? 30 to 40 members. And today we averaged about 40 again. So yeah, the monthly webinars normally gather so many people. For the weekly one, yeah, it's about 5 to 6.
Yeah, I really like this, this discipline of, that you are meeting every Monday. I think that's really fantastic. Sometimes I hear, like, people, oh, they do that, and then they do it for 6 months, and then for some reason they can't do one, and then it falls off, for example, whatever they're doing. So I really admire that you have been persistent at the weekly ones, and I want to thank you for organizing the monthly webinars as well. When you pinged me to join, for me it was a very easy answer, because I've already seen from the other webinars that we're doing such a fantastic job online and hosting other people, that I was even kind of a little bit jealous. I was like, I also want to go there, and I thank you that you invited me, and I thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, so that actually brings me to the next thing. Chantel and Tracy were actually drafting an email to you and Chris, and just go tell Chris that you've beaten him in the number of events that you've attended. This is from, which episode was that, Tracy, if you remember? Where Jose was talking about...
It was Elixir Talk.
Yeah, it was Elixir Talk.
Elixir Talk.
Yeah.
Episode 165.
Oh, you remember the episode number? Yeah, Elixir Talk, episode 165.
Yes, it was good.
Yeah, I remember that. I was joking that I've been to the podcast more times than Chris. Yeah.
Yeah. So go tell him you're the first one to come for the ElixirKenya Q&A session.
I'll let him know.
All right. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Chantel, you have anything to say?
Yeah. So thank you, Joseph. Even with extended time, we unfortunately couldn't exhaust all we had for you. And as we all know, all good things come to an end. Well, in this case, our session is coming to an end. Yeah, so thank you all for attending today's session. We wouldn't have done it without you. And thank you to the organizers too for organizing this. It's something big. It's
all right. Thank you very much, everyone. Shoaib, you can remain in the call to talk. All right.
Yeah,
bye-bye,
thank
everyone.
you. Have a great weekend, everybody.
All right. Bye-bye.